1962 often lives in the shadow of louder cinematic revolutions, yet beneath the obvious landmarks lies a collection of films that dared to be intimate, strange, or quietly subversive. These are not always the titles that dominate retrospectives or streaming homepages. Instead, they linger in late-night broadcasts, repertory screenings, and the memories of devoted film lovers who stumbled upon them by accident. What makes this year fascinating is its emotional range. Hollywood melodramas wrestled with desire and decay. War stories questioned heroism, and low-budget nightmares hinted at the coming horror renaissance. The studio system was still standing, but cracks were visible in tone, theme, and character complexity. These films may not carry the loud legacy of blockbuster milestones, yet each one holds a spark that helped reshape genres in subtle ways. Forgotten does not mean insignificant. It often means waiting patiently to be rediscovered.
Walk on the Wild Side plunges into the underbelly of New Orleans with unapologetic sensuality. Directed by Edward Dmytryk, the film follows a naive Texan drifting through brothels and broken dreams in search of lost love. The title sequence alone, featuring prowling alley cats, became iconic for its bold symbolism. Jane Fonda, in an early role, brings fragile magnetism, while Barbara Stanwyck dominates as a hardened madam, balancing authority and vulnerability. The film explores desire, power, and repression with a frankness unusual for early 60s Hollywood. Beneath the melodrama lies commentary on loneliness and transactional relationships in a society obsessed with propriety. Its atmosphere feels humid and morally ambiguous, blending noir shadows with southern heat. Though controversial upon release, Walk on the Wild Side expanded mainstream cinema's willingness to confront sexuality and emotional exploitation without retreating into moral sermonizing or simplistic redemption.
Kid Galahad pairs boxing drama with unexpected sincerity. Directed by Phil Carlson, the film casts Elvis Presley as a mechanic whose raw talent draws him into the brutal world of prize fighting. While marketed as a star vehicle, the story explores exploitation beneath the sports spectacle. Presley delivers a surprisingly restrained performance, projecting humility rather than flamboyant charisma. The fight sequences emphasize physical toll instead of flashy choreography, grounding the narrative in sweat and consequence. Supporting performances add texture, particularly Gig Young as a manager balancing ambition and concern. Rather than framing victory as guaranteed destiny, the film highlights uncertainty and sacrifice. Released during Presley's prolific film period, it was overshadowed by lighter musicals. Yet Kid Galahad stands apart for its grounded tone, revealing vulnerability within celebrity persona and presenting boxing not merely as entertainment, but as harsh proving ground for fragile dreams. Carnival of Souls. Carnival of Souls emerged from near obscurity to become a cornerstone of independent horror. Directed by Herc Harvey on a minimal budget, the film follows a church organist haunted by spectral visions after surviving a car accident. Shot in stark black and white, its abandoned pavilion locations evoke eerie desolation. Candice Hilligoss delivers an understated performance that amplifies the story's unsettling ambiguity. The narrative unfolds like a waking nightmare, blending psychological dislocation with supernatural suggestion. Rather than relying on jump scares, the film cultivates dread through silence and repetition. Its surreal imagery and open-ended conclusion prefigured later art house horror movements. Initially overlooked and distributed unevenly, Carnival of Souls found appreciation through midnight screenings and critical reevaluation. Today it stands as proof that atmosphere and existential unease can transcend budget limitations, influencing generations of filmmakers drawn to minimalism and haunting emotional isolation. Sweet Bird of Youth adapts Tennessee Williams with smoldering intensity, translating stage confrontation into cinematic heat. Directed by Richard Brooks, the film pairs Paul Newman's fading drifter with Geraldine Page's emotionally ravaged actress. Their relationship pulses with mutual dependency and resentment, exposing the cruelty of ambition and lost innocence. The Southern setting amplifies themes of corruption and hypocrisy, reflecting societal decay beneath polished surfaces. Newman tempers charm with desperation, while Page's performance trembles between fragility and ferocity. The screenplay retains Williams' biting dialogue, allowing characters to wound each other verbally long before physical consequences arrive. Though softened slightly to appease censorship standards, the film still carries provocative weight. Overlooked compared to other Williams adaptations, Sweet Bird of Youth remains a searing meditation on aging, reputation, and the painful realization that youth and opportunity rarely return once squandered by fear or compromise.
Light in the Piazza drifts through Florence and Rome with a softness that disguises its emotional depth. Directed by Guy Green, the film follows an American mother traveling through Italy with her daughter, whose intellectual disability shapes every romantic possibility that emerges. What could have become sentimental instead unfolds with delicate restraint. Olivia de Havilland anchors the story with protective anxiety, while Yvette Mimieux brings vulnerability and innocence without caricature. The Italian locations glow in luminous color cinematography, turning architecture into emotional atmosphere. Rather than dramatizing conflict through explosive confrontation, the film lingers in glances, hesitations, and parental fear of letting go. It challenges assumptions about autonomy, love, and dignity at a time when such conversations were rarely addressed directly on screen. Overlooked amid flashier productions, Light in the Piazza remains a quietly progressive drama that treats its characters with compassion instead of spectacle or pity.
The War Lover strips the glamour from aerial combat and replaces it with psychological instability. Directed by Philip Leacock, the film centers on a reckless bomber pilot whose bravado masks obsession and emotional emptiness. Steve McQueen delivers one of his most unsettling performances, radiating charisma while hinting at dangerous detachment. Unlike triumphant war epics, this story questions the morality of thrill-seeking in the middle of destruction. The aerial sequences are intense, yet grounded, emphasizing claustrophobia inside the bomber rather than patriotic spectacle. Robert Wagner's restrained counterbalance highlights the tension between responsibility and ego. The film dares to suggest that heroism can blur into addiction and that wartime valor may conceal personal voids. Released during an era still saturated with traditional war narratives, The War Lover felt uncomfortably introspective. Today, it stands as a sobering character study that anticipates later anti-war storytelling with sharp psychological focus. 2 Weeks in Another Town dissects Hollywood ego against the backdrop of Rome's fading glamour. Directed by Vincente Minnelli, the film follows a washed-up actor invited overseas to assist a troubled director. Kirk Douglas delivers volcanic intensity, portraying insecurity simmering beneath professional confidence. The film reflects the instability of the studio system itself, exposing artistic rivalry and personal breakdown with operatic flair. Minnelli's vivid color palette contrasts emotional chaos with picturesque Italian settings, creating a tension between beauty and decay. The narrative feels self-aware, almost confessional, as if the industry were examining its own fractures. Rather than romanticizing filmmaking, it portrays cinema as battleground for pride and relevance. Released during a transitional era, the movie did not receive the recognition of Minnelli's earlier classics, yet its raw exploration of artistic desperation and fading stardom makes it a fascinating precursor to later meta-cinematic dramas.
All Fall Down. All Fall Down presents family dysfunction without sentimental cushioning. Directed by John Frankenheimer, the film centers on a reckless charmer whose selfishness destabilizes everyone around him. Warren Beatty embodies seductive irresponsibility, while Eva Marie Saint delivers aching sincerity as the woman caught in his orbit. Told partly through the perspective of a younger brother, the narrative examines hero worship collapsing into disillusionment. Frankenheimer avoids melodramatic excess, favoring intimate framing that captures emotional fractures within domestic spaces. The script confronts sexual double standards and moral hypocrisy, subjects rarely treated with such nuance at the time. Rather than punishing characters through grand tragedy, the film lets disappointment linger quietly.
Released without major fanfare, it faded beside more sensational dramas. Yet All Fall Down stands as a perceptive character study of charisma's destructive pull, revealing how personal mythology can corrode love, trust, and familial stability.
Lonely Are the Brave. Lonely Are the Brave feels like a Western elegy for disappearing freedom. Directed by David Miller and starring Kirk Douglas, the film follows a modern cowboy resisting bureaucratic authority in a rapidly changing America. Unlike traditional frontier tales, this story unfolds against highways and barbed wire rather than open wilderness. Douglas portrays stubborn independence with melancholy undertones, embodying a man out of time. The narrative questions romantic myths of self-reliance by showing their incompatibility with modern society. Jerry Goldsmith's score enhances the sense of tragic inevitability, emphasizing loneliness over triumph. Instead of climactic heroics, the film builds toward quiet, devastating realism. Released during a period when Westerns were shifting tone, it struggled to find broad audiences. Today, it resonates as a poignant meditation on individualism's limits and the cost of clinging to ideals in an increasingly regulated world.
Tower of London. Tower of London revisits historical horror with economical efficiency. Directed by Roger Corman, the film reimagines Richard III through Gothic stylization and theatrical menace. Vincent Price commands the screen with chilling relish, transforming political ambition into macabre spectacle. Unlike lavish period epics, this production relies on atmosphere rather than scale. Fog-drenched corridors and shadowed chambers create claustrophobic dread within limited sets. Corman's brisk pacing sustains tension, proving that historical drama can intersect with horror sensibilities. The film blends Shakespearean intrigue with exploitation aesthetics, offering audiences both literary reference and visceral thrills. Though dismissed by some critics as modest genre fare, it demonstrates resourceful filmmaking and tonal daring. Tower of London may not possess the grandeur of big-budget counterparts, but its fusion of stage tragedy and Gothic cinema reveals how imagination can compensate for financial restraint. The Treasures of 1962 reveal a year rich with experimentation hiding beneath mainstream visibility. These films explore psychological fragility, moral ambiguity, fading glory, and social transition without relying on spectacle alone. Some challenged genre expectations, others quietly questioned cultural norms, and a few anticipated cinematic movements that would flourish later in the decade. Their relative obscurity today says more about shifting trends than about artistic value. Each title carries a distinct emotional texture, whether intimate romance, war disillusionment, Gothic intrigue, or existential horror. Rediscovering them offers insight into a moment when the studio system balanced tradition with subtle rebellion. They remind us that history is not built solely from the loudest successes, but from layered contributions that influence storytelling in quieter ways. To revisit these films is to uncover a cinematic crossroads where classic form and modern sensibility briefly coexisted.